There is a lot going on in the AI world, and Musk chimed in. This is an interesting one because he's saying that AI is going to replace almost all labor and change the definition of capitalism. Hey, there was a really interesting piece I found in the Wall Street Journal. You know, they've kind of gone a little left in some of their political views, but they still have some great writing when it comes to technology, business, direction, all of that sort of stuff. So, you know that, Elon Musk is kind of our friendly neighborhood billionaire, right? Elon Musk has been busy doing all kinds of things, the boring project, which is one that makes tunnels. Of course, you got the bigger ones people know about, SpaceX, about Tesla's. Did you know he's got another one where he's trying to tie the brain directly into computers? And he's going after, of course, people who are boxed in, which is just phenomenal. I literally cried when I started thinking about that. The poor people that just don't have control of themselves, of their bodies, but still the brain is there. So, congratulations to him. Kudos to him for that sort of stuff. And of course, he's also working on trying to get humanity on multiple planets so that an asteroid or a rogue AI can't wipe us out. So, really, really good. And he's been very good about painting this picture of our future. And I think it's really worth taking a look at, particularly his view of AI. A lot of people are worried about having their jobs taken over. Some already have had. Some businesses have jumped a little too quick at getting rid of some of the employees, like writers, for instance. And that's what that whole strike was about down in Hollywood not too long ago. So where is this all leading? Well, to kick off this article, Elon's talking about a utopian vision of the future. Now, I want you to think about a utopian vision that maybe you've seen before on TV and in movies, frankly. That's kind of the Star Trek utopian future. Now, of course, there's bad guys, right? I think there always will be bad guys, but the ultimate truth of Star Trek is, hey, listen, we can all just live in peace. If we can have almost unlimited energy, thanks to, the Star Trek technology, which isn't real, but, if we can have basically unlimited free energy, and we can turn that energy into matter, and we have these very smart computers, where might that lead? And that's what that Star Trek future is projecting, which is we work on ourselves. We work on creative endeavors. We work on exploring, right? Exploring is kind of their main theme, no question about it. And Elon's pulling all of this artificial intelligence and automation front and center of his utopian vision. Does that sound interesting to you? I thought so, certainly. But essentially what he's doing is he's peering into tomorrow where, thanks to AI, we'll have a lot less manual labor to do. Now, we've been through a few revolutions before. We had the Industrial Revolution where we were able to industrialize almost everything, and that drove costs down. It gave people jobs and better jobs in some cases. Now, you could certainly argue that there are some utopian visions of an agrarian society, and I would be right there with you because I absolutely agree. And some of those were, of course, destroyed by the whole Industrial Revolution. But what also came of that was new jobs, new types of jobs, new jobs where there was a whole lot of thinking involved, a lot of creativity involved, right? We lost the horse and carriage, and therefore the Teamsters are gone, right? Well, obviously there's a Teamsters union, which has obviously managed to persist, but we don't have people driving horses anymore, horse teams or any of that sort of stuff. And yet, even though New York City was covered with all of these places to park your horse, take care of your horse, repair the buggies, etc., there are far more jobs today than there ever was back in the horse and buggy days, because that technology where we went to the internal combustion engines ended up displacing entire industries, and yet at the same time created newer and I think it's arguable industries and jobs. So doing a lot less manual labor is an interesting point, because how much manual labor are we actually doing today? But can you imagine maybe the Jetsons future, where you don't need to lift a finger to do any of your day-to-day chores? It's like having a Roomba on steroids. Well, that's the age of abundance Musk is raving about. And I look forward to this too. I've been talking about this for decades now. We still have some more pieces of the puzzle that need to go in place, and it could go really poorly too. Let's not forget that. But one important thing that we really need to focus on is that Musk is not just anyone. He's not just any billionaire. He's not somebody like the founder of Microsoft that just did all kinds of terrible things to people and cheated his way all the way to the top, right? And has continued to do all kinds of things to people worldwide. We're not going to get into all that right now. But he is a real influencer in the computer science and AI realms. And he is because he's smart that way. Again, not like Bill Gates, but, certainly his successor had very few brains, and when it comes to technology anyways, right? And then we ended up in Microsoft with a pretty good guy that they had at Microsoft right now. But his predictions, talking about Musk, especially about AI, have been a hot point of discussion. Remember, Elon Musk, was one of the co-founders of OpenAI, the guys that gave us ChatGPT. So now I want you to brace yourselves, because we're going to go into this a little bit deeper, because this article is talking about the potential impacts of Musk's vision on capitalism. Now, what is capitalism? Well, there is pure capitalism, and I'm not in favor of that, where it's, where you get these consultants that come into town and go ahead and take a company and break it into pieces and sell off the pieces. That I don't like that, but that's on the edges, right? We don't see that all of the time. But capitalism basically means, hey, I'm exchanging goods or services for goods or services, right? It's supposedly a fair trade, a fair exchange, and everything's open. Well, considering that the workforce scenario that Musk is talking about here could be significantly different from our current one, it's going to be quite a ride, because according to Musk, we could be heading towards a world where robots replace a huge chunk of manual labor. Just think about that for a second. Your daily tasks automated. The tasks of many industrial workers automated. And these ideas shake up the traditional worker-capitalist relationship. It's like staring at a massive tsunami that really can and will redefine how we work and how we value creation. And remember, right now, AIs can't create. They can just look for the most likely next word when it's doing things. But the large language models are used right now to find breast cancer, to find other disease, to solve amazingly difficult questions, not because they're solving it from a point of intelligence, but because they're able to pull enough information together, recognize the patterns that we might have been missing because there's so much data that has to be analyzed, and take those patterns and come up with an amazing solution, right? Amazing to us anyways, bottom line. So these ideas are really shaking things up already today. But the question in everyone's mind is, frankly, are we prepared for this? Is society prepared for this? And there's people who have proposed, let's have a universal minimum wage. And it's being tried, in fact, in a few different places where people got $2,000 a month has been kind of the norm for that. and it's always been a failure. And if you think about it again, it's like, well, the government kicks in $7,500 for an electric car. The price of an electric car goes up $7,500, right? Look at what happened during the lockdown, where the federal government was pouring trillions of dollars all over the place, right? Billions, hundreds of billions. It was just leaking money, giving it to everybody and really, he's giving it to the banks, and the banks kept a lot of it and passed a little bit on to everyone else, right? Didn't go to consumer money. And again, this is not a show on economics, but that money, when it hit the market, did what? It drove up the prices of everything. So a universal basic income sounds good, but if there are only certain limited products or services being offered, that income guarantees the prices will go up. All right. So this Musk's Age of Abundance article in the Wall Street Journal here, it's something to really think over. Look at the future here. Look at the dynamics with you and your job. We're seeing more and more older people, seniors, getting back into the workplace because they have experience that the younger workers don't have and that businesses need. What's going to happen when these younger kids coming up can only use ChatGPT or some large language model, right? Still going to need human intelligence in order to direct the artificial intelligence. Hey, make sure you get my weekly newsletter. This was in the newsletter. It's free, craigpeterson.com. The use of generative AI has truly revolutionized the attacks that are coming in. It's called business email compromise. We've talked about it on the show before. But these new technologies, such as OpenAI's ChatGPT and Bard from Google and many others now, they're enabling the hosers to automate the creation of what is truly very convincing, personalized fake emails. And they're able to do it at a very, very low cost. So all of that means that they are able to increase the frequency of attacks and enhance the success rate of the attacks. Cyber criminals that even don't have fluency in a target's language can now create out of thin air, using OpenAI and others, these persuasive phishing or business email compromise emails. One of the things we used to just joke about back in the day were these Nigerian print scams, because you'd read the email and the English in it was so poor, it was definitely not American English, that you recognize instantly, hey, this is not real. This is not really a Nigerian prince, or maybe it is. I don't know. I'm confused. And one of the things that the hosers were doing at the time is relying on the fact that people who maybe don't recognize the poor English content might be more susceptible to the emails themselves. Now, that is frankly a shame, but they were doing all of that on purpose. In fact, I designed a system that was designed specifically to track down and stop these Nigerian emails. It was quite something. It was part of a DoD project, and the Nigerian government had reached out. Interesting problems. But that was years ago, right? So now today, they can write these phishing emails using the large language models via just any language or even medium that they want to use. So they could write it in French, German, Russian, you name it. Now, it might sound a little off, but man, the translation abilities of these large language models keep getting better and better all of the time. Very, very convincing. So what are we looking at right now? Well, there's a growing trend of offering jailbreaks for AI interfaces. Now, if you're not familiar with a jailbreak, the whole idea behind it is to get around some form of a limitation. For instance, on your iPhone, it's very locked down. It's called a walled garden in technology terms. And that walled garden stops you from doing stupid things is kind of the bottom line, right? So that Apple can keep you safe while you're using the iPhone. Android is a similar walled garden, not as stringent as Apple's, where Apple has full control over the hardware. Google doesn't have control over the hardware at all, right? Except in the Pixel phone. And even then, they're not as focused on it as Apple is. No two ways about it. So you're trying to get around the limitations that they put into your smartphone so that you can root the phone or jailbreak the phone. And I remember the first time I jailbroke, I guess, my Android phone, I was just stunned to see a terminal prompt there, a root prompt. And you probably know already, I've been a Unix guy since 82 or 83, right? So it was very strange to see that right there in my smartphone. But that's what we're trying to do. Well, today we have all of these different AIs, and there's restrictions that are placed on them. And some of the restrictions are there to stop us from maybe coming up with some sort of a nefarious scheme, right? You can't ask it to, how do I make a nuclear bomb, at least not directly. So you then have to kind of word it a little strangely. It won't give you a diagnosis, but if you're saying, hey, if I'm doing a study on this and that, and I see these other things, what might that indicate, right? And then it'll give you some medical advice. Well, that's basically a jailbreak. So these criminals are now getting, again, a carrot in front of your nose, phishing, trying to get you to respond to, hey, we can get you around those limitations on AI. So this is obviously presenting a real challenge for the AI security people, But at the same time, it's scary when you get right down to it. So let's talk about what the criminals are doing here. These hosers, they're not limited to using the AI tools you and I are likely using, because there are so many models out there that are designed for anyone to use and experiment with. You can download them all day long and have a whole lot of fun with it. And I have done it. I've built 4 or 5 different AI models. I'm running completely on my own machine. It never goes out to ChatGPT or elsewhere, right? So all of the data is there locally. The hosers can do this too. But in addition to that now, ChatGPT, OpenAI, allows you to develop modules that sit on top of OpenAI. And these modules then are advertised to other hosers and sold to them and saying, hey, look at what you can do now using our module. And it's really increasing the complexity of cybercrime and the whole AI area. So what we're looking at now is something called WormGPT. This is a new threat. It's a new black hat alternative to the GPT models designed particularly for malicious activities. And this is a language model with advanced capabilities, and it's emphasizing its potential for some really sophisticated phishing and business email compromise attacks. So BEC, business email compromise attacks, those are basically, it's just phishing emails, okay? That's the bottom line there. But hey, it's phishing emails against businesses. I have picked up clients who contacted me saying, we lost all of our money out of our operating account. That has happened to me multiple times. And then we get involved after the horse is out of the barn, right? But it's a problem that can happen to anyone, and more nowadays as they get more convincing in these BEC emails. Well, generative AI offers some significant advances, obviously, and advantages for these BEC attacks. It lets them create emails with impeccable grammar, reduce the chances of being flagged as suspicious by spam filters and by you and me as we read the silly things. and it lowers the entry threshold for executing attacks. So the technology is effectively democratizing the process. You no longer have to be a programmer to be a bad guy, right? You no longer have to have a big-ass team in order to put all of this stuff together. That which also scares me when we think about elections and even just in general political direction and what people think and what's happening, because we've known about these troll farms for a long time. There have been movies, TV shows made about them. But what happens when you don't need to have 100 people sitting there making up these fake posts and putting them up online? Yeah, this is what can do that and will do it. So as AI is contributing to these new attack vectors, we need to put in some strong preventative measures so that this means some extensive, regularly updated training programs aimed at countering these BEC attacks. And everybody's advised to enforce some rigorous email verification processes and systems that automatically flag potential BEC attacks. That's part of what we do for our clients. We use some very advanced software to tag and reject a lot of emails. So we're talking tens of thousands a day right now. It's crazy. Just my clients. CraigPeterson.com. Well, you may not know it, but these hosers out in the digital wildlife areas, right out free roaming, have found some new ways to be a nuisance or worse, frankly, a lot worse. They have launched what's called malware-free attacks. You heard that right. No malware. Just good manners, right? Borrowing what's already there in your system to cause you nothing but headaches. Yeah, they're making a mess. Now, they're using these legitimate tools that Microsoft has stolen from the Unix world. Well, okay, maybe that's not quite the right wording. But Microsoft has finally figured out that the rest of the world, once again, was correct. And you need to have a command line in order to do some more advanced things. Remember, forever, Microsoft, you had to click through multiple screens, figure out which screens, and then once you had all of that, you had to remember to do that now on each computer, et cetera, et cetera. So Microsoft copied the idea of shells and the Unix world, where we've had multiple shells for a very long time, and the shells have evolved over time. And Microsoft called it the PowerShell, right? Just like Microsoft took the term SQL and called it a SQL server. Well, no, that's an IBM term. I don't know how Microsoft gets away with this all of the time, just copywriting various words that are used and have been used for decades in the industry and co-ops them in some people's minds. Anyways, they have now something called PowerShell. And PowerShell is actually quite powerful in the Microsoft world. And it's fairly easy to learn. If you know any other programming languages, particularly shell languages, it's quite easy to figure out. But the bad guys here are making a mess. They're using these legitimate tools that are used for management of these machines. So instead of me going around to every client's site and every client's computer in order to do various things, I can just write a PowerShell script, install some software, special software called RMM software on their computers. And then what I do is I send that PowerShell script to their computer to do things. So for instance, every week I changed the passwords on every one of my clients' computers. Now think about that, right? When you're talking about thousands of computers, you need an army to do that, just to change the passwords. But in addition to that, we do updates, we look for potential problems, right? It's very, very busy. There's a lot to do. And Microsoft has this whole PowerShell thing is very recent in internet terms, right? Unix has been around since about 1970. It's been in use in colleges. The internet was developed completely on Unix computers. And then Microsoft adopted this very recently, and they have never been security conscious. So it's used for remote monitoring software. It's used for all kinds of legitimate purposes. And the folks at Huntress, which is a cybersecurity outfit that keeps an eye on these things for small and medium businesses, found out what was going on. And they think that these hits are especially unsettling because most SMBs don't have the thorough monitoring to catch this sort of sneakiness. It's called SIEM, SIEM. You can look it up online in XDR. But that type of software is designed to help look for this, but it still takes a whole lot of work, a lot of monitoring, okay? So these digital bandits are taking a real shine to the whole idea of remote monitoring and management software. There have been a couple of huge hacks that came through some legitimate RMM software, but they've been using these RMM tools, like what I mentioned, some of the PowerShell stuff, for their underhanded attacks. So if you're using McAfee, let's say, or you're using even the built-in Windows Defender, it's looking for certain signatures in files to see whether or not you might be hacked, right? Yeah, okay, here it is. Okay, yeah, we just found this signature, and that means you've got the XYZ.5 variant of a virus, okay, malware. That's how it does it. Well, when the bad guys are using tools such as PowerShell scripts to do their bidding, doesn't have that kind of a signature. You see where the problem's coming in, right? So Huntress noticed in 65% of the incidents, the hosers used RMM software to stick around in the system or remotely access it. So RMM is a good tool when it's used for good, but when it's used for intrusion, it slips past security and blends right in if all you're using is the basic stuff that's out there. And unfortunately, the smaller your organization, the more likely that you could be compromised by this because you don't do checkups on their RMM tool use often enough. So the study also observed malicious forwarding or other inbox tricks, accounting for 64% now of identity-focused attacks against SMBs. Isn't that amazing? Another 24% had suspicious logins from odd places, and that's why you should keep an eye on your login logs on your computers, particularly anything exposed to the internet. And by the way, do not have an RDP server exposed to the internet ever, okay? That's the remote desktop protocol for Microsoft. It has been known to be full of all kinds of holes that get compromised, okay? So most of the activities are part of these more elaborate business email compromise schemes like we talked about earlier, but they tend to be caught in the act very early on. So you've got something called QACBot, QAK bot related incidents have been going down, and there's also been some interesting positive developments in the ransomware scene because the FBI, Interpol have been shutting down some of these big botnets and some of these ransomware hubs. Did you realize that for as little as about $30 or $40, you can license ransomware on the dark web? And then you can send it to someone, like you send it to other people inside your organization, and people have been caught doing this. And then there's a ransom paid, and you get a percentage of that ransom. Isn't that something? You get anywhere from about 80% to 60% of that ransom money because you sent that ransom. You didn't have to write the ransomware. You don't even have to do tech support, if you will, for the ransomware, where the number that comes up when the machine's being ransomed, or the email address or the talk channel, Telegram, whatever it might be, is actually the guys that wrote the ransomware and licensed it to you, right? So you don't have to do anything. So as a word of caution here for SMBs, you are a juicy target for these hosers, regardless of whether they're going after QuickBuck via ransomware or business email compromises, or even worse, they're doing the work of foreign spies, and we've seen that many times where business computers are taken over and are used as cold drops for everything from beheading videos on out. So then to add insult to injury, the bad guys are taking advantage of blind spots in our security like this, like remote management tools, like PowerShell, which, by the way, you cannot do without anymore. You just can't, because Microsoft doesn't even give you access to a lot of the features that you have to use PowerShell in order to get, okay? So in the past, a good antivirus might have been enough, but it isn't going to cut it anymore. Times are changing, and SMBs and home users need to step up, and I'll try and keep you on top of all of that with my free newsletter every week, craigpeterson.com. You can sign up for free right there. And of course, right here as well as we talk about it. Any questions, you can email me, M-E, at craigpeterson.com. So Apple has messages that allows you to send encrypted messages end-to-end. Apple can't get their hands on it. And you see the same thing with WhatsApp, Signal, certainly. Signal is probably your best encrypted app out there. To keep it out of the hands of the bad guys, keep it out of the hands of the government as well, right? It's like that old communist saying, show me the man, I'll show you the crime, right? You dig deep enough, you can interpret anything, or you can derive any conclusion you want to about things people said, right? Or things that people did that really weren't the intent, and go after them and corner them. That's what the communists have done for years. That's what fascists have done. Everybody on the left. And when I say left, I mean kind of the socialist side of things, right? These dictatorships, the German National Socialists, et cetera, et cetera. Anyways, I'm being redundant here. And now we're looking at the federal government in the United States. They are not allowed to just collect random data on us. So what do we see them doing? Well, one thing that we've talked about before on the show is they go to data brokers, and the data brokers have all of this information, public information they've bought, and they pull it all together and then they sell it. In fact, I've got another article that was in my newsletter we'll talk about in a minute that's kind of right along those lines. But there are some parts of our smartphones, whether it's an Android or an Apple, and really those are the only two that you can really talk about in this context, as there's so few competitors to those two out there. Apple, because of its ease of use, its integration and security, and Android because it's free, right? So it keeps the cost of the phones down. But governments have been figuring out a way around this, and to me, it's disheartening, frankly. But your smartphone can really be a little more revealing than you might think. The iPhone and Android push notifications might be spilling the beans on you. Now, push notifications are those, think of it as a pop-up. It says, hey, the weather today is going to be blah, blah. Traffic, watch out for traffic ahead, right? Any of those types of notifications that come up. Hey, so-and-so sent you an email, and here's the first line of it. Yeah, well, governments are taking some interest here. They're using the notification feature on your phone to keep tabs on individuals. Not much unlike a bunch of nosy neighbors, and certainly against the law and the Constitution of the United States of America. So this is according to Senator Ron Wyden. There have been chatter about foreign governments fishing for push notification data from Apple and Google since spring of about 2022. Yeah, okay. And if the other governments are doing it, sniff around a bit, I bet we're doing it too. So the tech giants' response to the spying claims was hush-hush from the companies. Apparently going into details about how the push notification data was used and how it was distributed was kind of a no-fly zone, courtesy of our government. But hang on, alongside these revelations, there appears to be some changes coming. Apple and Google have been caught in a bit of a spotlight, and they're now changing the way they are handling our push notification data. So believe it or not, Apple admitted that the federal government had kept them mum about it. But now that the cat's out of the bag, they're sprucing up their transparency reports to include these types of request details. I think that's really, really important. Are you familiar with canary notices on websites where if the federal government sends you an order from a judge or whatever, more and more they're extrajudicial, right? But they send you one of these things and there's an immediate gag order on it. You can't talk about this. So what a canary notice does is security-minded companies will put something like in their quarterly reports or on their website that says, we have not been asked by the government for any personal information. They word these things differently, but that's the idea. And so if all of a sudden it disappears from their report, you can bet they had to comply with some government order that came in, right? So those are called canary notices, just like a canary in the coal mine. Keep an eye on that one too. So Google's, speaking of canaries, singing a similar tune here, and they're expressing some common ground with Senator Wyden, because Google's also saying they want to keep users informed about these types of requests. So let's take a stroll down here the developer alley. Typically, any data that's associated with user accounts on an app stays with the third-party developers that create the apps. But here's the twist. The data sent via push notifications has a pit stop at Apple or Google's end before it gets to us. And that's where the loophole lies. So if Mr. Law Enforcement comes knocking on their door with a request, those companies could be handing over your data. Get it? So even though that app, that WhatsApp that got the notification is encrypted end to end, and it's got that pop-up, that notification on your screen, you are in fact having that notification delivered to Apple or Google. All right. And they will comply with the orders that come in from the government, right, on various levels. So depending on your app choices, your push notifications might be carrying more than just reminders. They might have that first line of the email. It might have the whole message, right? Potentially, this could be revealing some personal or sensitive information about you. So keeping this in mind, it's probably a good idea to take a look at your phone settings and think about adjusting those, frankly, useful push notifications, okay? So consider that. You can go through the settings on your iPhone. It's kind of an app-by-app thing, or on your Android phone, and turn off or limit the notifications that the various apps are sending. So we've got another one here, and this is the staggering amount of sensitive information that's been exposed and unsealed here in this FTC filing. Okay, so this Kochava, I'm probably mispronouncing that, or Kochava, one of the world's biggest mobile data brokers, lost its fight with the FTC, where it was trying to keep secret the information that it was selling about you and me. So all of this got laid bare in a court document. The judge in the case, Lynn Windmill, released it all. The FTC said that the company made a quick buck by selling people sensitive data without asking them. Now, we've talked before about the ambulance chasing lawyers who bought information based on a geofence. Now, in other words, what they did is they said, okay, well, here's the GPS location of this hospital. I want this ad to appear on anyone's phone that went into this location recently or is there right now. And some of that got shut down, by the way, right away, because people obviously started complaining. But Kokava's customers, basically advertisers, can get their hands on this data to track an individual's comings and goings, even to sensitive spots like hospitals and places of worships. But it gets more personal. They alleged that Kochava could take information like names, home addresses, phone numbers, and other touchy subjects like people's races, their sex, ethnicity, income, political leanings, and religious beliefs, and sell that as well. And the FTC alleged that Kochava offered such a specific breakdown on folks that advertisers could target customers based on sneaky specifics like their whereabouts, political associations, or even life experiences like expecting a baby. Can you imagine that? Imagine being handpicked by advertisers just because you visited something somewhere, right? And the FTC didn't like these practices. So is this data collection or is this an invasion of privacy, right? So the FTC is saying that these big data brokers who are gobbling up all of this data from all sorts of places that the government loves because they can just go to the data broker and buy the data rather than spy directly on you and say, what else? No, we're not spying on Americans. What are you talking about, right? So the government has little reason to shut them down. So it's amazing the FTC is going against some of these guys. But here's something you may not be aware of. There are more than 275,000 mobile apps that are feeding your data to these companies like Kochava, these big data brokers. Okay, you got that? Remember, forever, how long we've been saying that it's you that are the product if you're not paying for it, and frankly, even if you are sometimes, right? So they can tell what apps you love, how long you hang out there, and your in-app spending habits. They may be able to tell where you are because some of them are asking for your location, right? Pretty invasive, bottom line, no question. So the FTC said that they can do more, they should do more to protect users' privacy, but they chose not to. So I like the fact that they're pulling all of this up. Kochava tried to keep these allegations under wraps. They argued to put them in a bad light. Yeah, duh. Judge Windmill disagreed, saying there's no reason to hide these complaints from folks' views. Okay? Acknowledged the FTC still needs to prove its accusations, but gave them the thumbs up to proceed with the case. So good for them. Hey, keep up to date on all this stuff, everybody. CraigPeterson.com, free weekly newsletter. Let's get the bad guys. I like the analogy of having your home and having windows in the house and having doors, front door, back door, let's keep it simple, and a couple of windows out front and a couple of windows in the back, and comparing that to your computer or your mobile phone. We're going to talk about your mobile smartphone right now. But what's the comparison, you might ask? You know, the house, of course, is going to be a lot bigger. Well, both of them are subject to attack by bad guys, those hosers that want to suck all of your money out of your bank accounts and out of your house. So what do you do with your home? Well, you might put up security cameras, you might have an alarm system, but at the very least, you're going to lock the doors, right? You're going to lock the front door, you're going to lock the back door, you're going to make sure the windows are closed and locked. And, you know, if somebody really, really wants to get in, they can certainly break in through the glass, maybe knock the door down. But it's going to be pretty obvious. And frankly, most bad guys aren't going to go to that length to get into your house to kind of poke around. In my case, we had an air conditioner and a window, and they pulled that air conditioner out of the window into the garden with the intent, of course, course, to climb into my house. But I have a Great Dane in the house, and she scared the would-be burglar off, right? Makes sense? Well, if you don't lock your windows, there are ways to get in, and the same thing is true when it comes to your mobile devices. I was on with one of the subscribers to my newsletter. She had hit respond and to one of my emails, or hit reply, and said she was having problems because she had been hacked and that her email had been hacked. And so I spent over an hour with her and kind of went through, okay, why do you think we're hacked and what's going on? As it turns out, she got a phishing email. Looked exactly like it was from Microsoft. There's a couple of things in the wording that if you're a computer guy or gal, you probably would have looked at the wording of that email and say, that's definitely not how this works. But it will fool most people. It fooled my dad as well. And he fell a victim to all of that sort of stuff. So they're always trying to get in, get around, send phishing emails to try and spam you out of existence, right? All of these emails, it gets so annoying. I'm getting so many of them. The good news is most of them are blocked, and our email filters that we use for our clients that are provided by Cisco, those email filters are blocking thousands, tens of thousands actually, of these malicious pieces of email that are trying to come in. And you know a little bit about that. But did you realize that your smartphone is also susceptible to some of these, particularly if you're using an Android device? I know, Craig. I knew you were going to go there because you always go there. You're always picking on Android. But if you have an Android device, if you've rooted it, and if you have also started side-loading applications, you are extremely vulnerable. So let's talk about the different flavors that are out there of mobile malware. Again, you can get this by going to my website at craigpeterson.com. You can do a little search there for the 10 flavors of mobile malware and use this. Keep this around because it's really important to know. So first up, we have spyware and malware. And these are all about invading your privacy in order to steal your personal information without you even knowing it. They collect passwords, they collect your location, and they sell them off to third parties who really don't have good intentions. These are the classic hosers that are trying to suck everything out of your accounts, right? Now, spyware and malware are, depending on what they're doing, but they are really for any machine, right? I'm not going to just pick an Android here because you can, of course, get spyware, malware of, for instance, browsing software. So it's using your browser, but most likely it's downloaded software. It's things like that really cool flashlight app, that really neat wallpaper. Both of those have been known as malware before, where they are used to deliver malware that then collects your contacts and then uses your phone to send out emails, phishing emails, as you to people you know, so that they're far more likely to open it. You got to be really careful about that. And the best thing to do is, again, do not root your phone. Don't try and get around the protections there. Keep your security updates on schedule or automatically downloaded. That's another nice thing about iOS devices, the iPhones. They just update themselves. Updates come out right away. When Apple has an update for one of these really serious vulnerabilities, they roll it out the next day. It starts to roll out. And usually within a week, I think the statistic I saw is more than 80% of the iPhones have that patch within a week. That's important. You compare that with the average Android device, 80% of the Android devices have never ever been patched. Does that tell you something, right? Again, that's one of the reasons you want to avoid most of the Android devices. Samsung has made a change recently where they are now committing to making sure that they provide security updates for their top-of-the-line phones. Only the real expensive, fancy ones security updates for them for a 5-year period. And Apple is typically providing them for 5 to 7 years, sometimes even longer. So again, Apple's going to give you that update almost immediately. Samsung, it's going to take 3 to 6 months on unusual schedules, right? Sometimes they can get it done faster. Sometimes they don't even bother with them because they have to go from Google over to Samsung, over to the software developers, and maybe drivers have to change. It can be a nightmare for them. And that's one of the big advantages Apple has, frankly, in the marketplace. They control the hardware and the software. So unlike Google, that has to worry about over 2,000 different Android devices, Apple only is worrying about a few dozen iOS devices. That's a huge advantage, frankly, for you as a user. So the next one on the list is drive-by downloads. You might not be aware of it, but you can just visit a website and that website will potentially download malicious software. We first started seeing this on Windows computers, and the problem was you didn't even know it was being downloaded. So Microsoft kind of cleaned up their act a little bit on this and stopped some of the drive-by downloads. The same thing is true for most of the other browsers out there. I was talking to one of our listeners, helping her out this week, and she's been using the Brave browser, Brave, from the Mozilla guys. That's Firefox people. And she really likes it, and it's frankly a great browser that I recommend for privacy, okay, all in all. But when you're on some of these sketchy online websites, that's where you're most likely to get one of these drive-by downloads. You might be clicking on a malicious link on a website, and that can lead to disaster. Think of red light districts. I think that might be one good way to put it. And with these red light districts, you may well be in danger while you're in there, okay? So be very, very careful. And again, it'll often try and get your contact list and then send viruses out to people who you know. And now your reputation is ruined, right? With all of your friends, you don't want to open up any of your emails again because you just spammed them, right? And maybe even gave them a virus, which is our next one, viruses and Trojans. Now, these usually are hiding in plain sight, especially Trojans. I mentioned a little bit earlier some of the software that's been known in the past to have malware inside of it. One of those pieces of software is the flashlight app that people were downloading that had malware inside of it that hosed all of the information that it could get out of your phone. Okay, so some of these things are Trojans. In other words, just like the Trojan horse looked like it was a gift, right? Oh yeah, it's a great gift. Let's bring it in. This is great. And inside, of course, were all kinds of people who were going to attack them, right? Bad guys by their definition. So even seemingly legitimate apps can have these viruses and Trojans on. So one of the big pieces of advice in general on your smartphone is only have software on your smartphone that you use. Delete apps that you have not been using. Apple's great about that, by the way. Apps that you haven't used in a while, it offloads from the phone. But if it's not on the phone, you've deleted it or it's been offloaded from the phone, it can't cause any damage. Does that make sense? So it's not on the phone, you've deleted it because you weren't using it, you're fine. The other thing to remember that's huge about apps, again, especially in this day and age with the European Union going after the Apple Store and the Google Play Store, is avoid downloading apps from third-party websites. So we're going to be talking about that when we get back. We're going to go into a lot more detail here on the other 7 that you need to know about here. They're part of the 10 flavors of mobile malware. What do you need to know? What are they doing? And what can you do about it? Make sure you get my newsletter every week. It's absolutely free. CraigPeterson.com/subscribe. And if you have any questions, just hit reply to the newsletter and we'll be glad to answer. The European Union has been doing a few different things to try and make things, I think, ultimately better for their citizens. I look at it and I can see both sides, I think, of that sword. One of them, of course, a few years ago was what's called the GDPR. If you're in business and you do business inside the European Union, you are required to keep certain information confidential, not move it outside of the European Union's physical territory. There's a whole bunch of things that you have to do, including getting permission to track someone. I can see that. I can see the advantages of something like that. They've also now basically forced Apple into putting USB-C connections on their iPhones and iPads because people were complaining, why do I have to have a special connector just to connect my iPhone to power and data? So, I think that's a good point. I really loved that connector that Apple's used for so long and replaced that big 30-pin connector. It's been nice. It can go on upside down or right side up. It doesn't really matter. There is no up or down. Well, the same thing is true with USB-C, although I think USB-C is slightly hard to put in, but only ever so slightly. So that now with your USB-C on your iPhone and your iPad, you can charge it just like every other device. In fact, if you bought a device that uses USB power in the last probably 6 months, it has come with a USB port on it that you're using for charging or for data collection, programming, etc. So there's some really good things about some of that. Well, another thing the European Union has done is they're now forcing companies like Apple and to a lesser extent Google to do or to allow what's called side loading. What side loading is you want to put an app on your phone, go ahead. That's the basics of it. Apple has for a long time, folks, been restricting your applications that you can buy and that you can use to applications that you download for free or you pay for on the Apple's App Store. And Apple takes some serious time and examination looking at them. Okay, it's all automated. And looking for potential problems with it. It might be malicious. Are they trying to hose information out of you? What's really going on with that? Oh, they do all kinds of good stuff to try and make sure that you're safe. Google, of course, has the Google Play Store, which is also a great little store. And that store has built right into it all kinds of features, again, to try and keep you safe. Now, Apple has proven to be better at keeping apps safe than Google has, but they both work at it. They both try, and they both do a very good job on that. Well, with the European Union now stepping in and trying to force Apple and Google to allow anybody to put up an app store that you can download apps from, life is changing. Just think about that now. What happens if Russia, some bad guys in North Korea or Iran or China or wherever, let's say some of them put up their own little app store and they've got an app that looks just like Mario Kart and you always wanted Mario Kart on your smartphone. And so it's all branded Mario Kart. It looks like Mario Kart, but you know what? It's cheaper than it is on the regular app store. So let's go over there and let's grab Mario Kart. Now, if you try and install that on your device, there are some checks and balances in there, but when they ask for permission to get at the microphone or to access your contacts, etc., most people just say, yeah, okay, I want to play Mario Kart. Why? I don't know why it's at, whatever, right? And you just click through. You click OK, everything's fine. Don't worry about it. And in fact, in plain sight now, they have an app available on an app store that looks perfectly legitimate, that you're allowed to download apps onto your iPhone or your Android phone, and it is, in fact, extremely malicious. That's going to be a side effect of what is happening in Europe right now. They may not allow this side loading, in other words, using third-party apps on your iPhone in the United States, Canada, and other areas, which is I think, a pretty good thing. And when I first got my first smartphone, it was actually an Android phone. It had LTE on it. It was a really cool phone, a high-end phone. And within just a matter of a few weeks, we returned them. We had two of them, my son and I, and we just couldn't stand it. It was just so buggy and so problematic. But of course, one of the first things we did was to take total control of the phone. We rooted the phone, and it was pretty cool because there you go. There's a little Unix operating system underneath them. Well, Linux, in fact, on the Android. So we turned those in and we switched them out for iPhones, never gone back because I don't want to mess with my phone. It's something I don't want to have to think about. I have to think about my computer. I have to think about the updates. I have to think about the software that I install, keep an eye on it, work on it, fix problems with it, right? You have to do that. I don't think that's the case, for me anyways, when it comes to the smartphone. The smartphone is an appliance. It needs to just work. And maybe I get that because of all of the years of the telephone company. Anytime you pick it up, you've got dial tone. But folks, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a computer that is every bit as powerful as what was on your desk last year or maybe even this year. That smartphone is a very fast, very capable computer. And the bad guys have been really focusing on those. They now have special malware that is targeted at mobile devices, and even phishing scams, which are not just linked to emails anymore. You've seen those. They started out with the Nigerian scam, right? You remember those? And it's moved on from there because they've adapted some of these for your mobile device to fit the screen, to fit what you're used to seeing on it. So they're using fake apps now to hose your data out. Emails that are specifically designed to trick you into revealing your bank information or other sensitive details. They might have a game that they're providing for free, wow, on the App Store, maybe even the legitimate App Store, and you are playing that game and up pops this little menu and it looks okay, it looks pretty legitimate, and you click on allow and off it goes and downloads something else, or at the same time uploading bank account information, other sensitive information. It's really getting harder and harder for ordinary people to tell what's real from what's not. We get probably a half a dozen emails a week from our customers saying, is this a legitimate email? Is this a legitimate invoice? I just got one of those today I was looking at, and one yesterday from a listener about that whole Microsoft scam, right? So be very, very careful. And the browsers that are on our smartphones are not completely safe either. There's browser exploits that are specifically targeted at smartphones, and it's a real problem, right? So again, keep that software updated. Only download stuff from trusted sources. That means from the stores, the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. And if you're using an Android device, you need to run regular security scans on it as well. It might sound like a hassle, but it's worth it. Hey, we are about halfway through our list. I want you to stick around because we've got more of the 10 flavors of mobile malware. What you need to know and what you need to do. CraigPeterson.com online. Well, a little bit of safety goes a long way here, and we've got to be very careful with our mobile devices, particularly because we're using them more and more. I was looking at the stats on my CraigPeterson.com website just this week, and I was comparing mobile browsers, in other words, the browsers that are there on your smartphone or your tablet, to desktops. Now, it wasn't very long ago the desktops ruled. People were visiting my website using their desktop computers and browsers, and they were like 80-90% of the users of my website. And so when I am sending out my newsletter every week, I was thinking, okay, what are they viewing it on? Well, they're viewing it on their desktop. They're reading their emails right there, then clicking through. Therefore, I should make sure that my website and my emails were all geared towards the desktop. What surprised me this week, wow, that has completely flipped. Somewhere around 70 to 80% of the visits to craigpeterson.com are from smartphones. Now, I don't think I'm giving away any insider secrets here. People who are in marketing probably have seen this with their clients as well. But to me, it was a bit of a surprise. But what it tells me when we're talking about these 10 tips is we need to be careful because the hosers, the bad guys, know this too. So they are putting these nasty little pieces of Trojan software, viruses, etc., on your phone as part of apps, as part of a website, kind of a drive-by download using JavaScript nowadays. And those are designed specifically for your smartphones. There was one that was going around, and it was being distributed by an ad network. Ad networks are where people will have a business and they want to advertise, and so they'll go to an ad network that puts ads up on multiple websites, and the ads will show up that are kind of geared towards you. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, right? That way a vendor doesn't have to go and talk to 100 different owners of different websites. They just deal with the ad network. Well, the ad network was showing ads that had drive-by malware on them. They had not been paying close attention to who their customers really were, the customers buying the ads. And that caused everyone a lot of headaches. So that still can happen. In the case I'm thinking about, maybe even the worst case, they weren't taking your data. They weren't grabbing your bank account information. They weren't grabbing any of your contacts. What they were interested in is the fact that your smartphone is a pretty fast little computer. So they had JavaScript, which is a programming language that's used for web browsers and is used to display stuff on your screen. They were writing programs for a web browser to run, the web browser on your smartphone, that did Bitcoin mining. Imagine that. And so they were, in some cases, literally burning up people's smartphones because the people had them in a case and the smartphone wasn't designed to dissipate that heat, to get rid of the heat from all of that computation stuff going on. And also, of course, burning through the charge in the matter of an hour or two on the smartphone. So some of that stuff's been fixed, but again, just because you're on that smartphone doesn't mean you're safe, particularly, again, if it's an Android smartphone. Now, mobile ransomware is something most people haven't even thought about. Ransomware is something that we pay attention to on our computers. And to help combat ransomware, what do? Well, we might put firewalls in. We, for our clients, provide multiple different filtration systems for their email to make sure that ransomware isn't getting through. Of course, it can fail, but we've been quite successful at that. But how about your smartphone? Are you paying attention to potential ransomware? You know, clicking on your smartphone can be just as dangerous as clicking a link on your desktop as well. And what happens with ransomware? Well, it encrypts everything it can get its hands on and then demands a ransom for the key to unlock them. Many of us are using backup systems for our computers. You might be using an iPhone and you use iCloud to back up your phone, for instance. I certainly do. There's pros and cons to that, just like everything, right? But if you can't pay up, you're going to lose your data. But if you have a really good backup of your smartphone, it doesn't matter, because you can just do a restore. It's very, very good. And the malware creators have gotten smarter too. They're using the improved smartphone performance and anonymous networks that our phones connect to, which includes, of course, the 5G or even newer technologies, to get out to spread the malware to other people even faster than ever before. Let's not forget about spyware as we're going through this. This is something that could be right there under our noses, and it can collect sensitive data, and it can spy on us without us ever expecting or suspecting a thing. We just had a major patch that was released by a vendor, but what really that covered one of these pieces of spyware. But what really hits me is the Barracuda spam firewall. A lot of businesses use them to try and prevent spam, and as it turns out, for I think it was 7 months, the Barracuda spam firewall had been completely compromised and was being used to get into networks, monitor networks, do all kinds of nasty stuff. And it got to the point where Barracuda said, okay, we can't fix this. Let us know and we'll send you a new one. And it turned out, I read an article a couple of weeks ago that even with that, the Barracuda spam firewall still was vulnerable. They had not been able to fully patch it. So, keep your eyes on it. Anyways, spyware can be a problem. Now, there's also something called MMS malware or SMS malware. It's been more on the MMS line. This is when you send a picture or a video via a text message to someone else. Now, it doesn't have to be text message. It can be any sort of a message where you're sending a video to someone. And what the bad guys have been doing is crafting malware that basically lives inside a picture or lives inside a video or even a voicemail message, so that when your smartphone starts playing that video or opens the picture, it is now infected. And that's what that Israeli group has been doing. It's an NGO group with their malware that has been used by governments to hack into people's phones, including iPhones, by the way. Absolutely a huge problem. Android systems have had a bit more of a problem with that as well. And these are specially crafted text messages can give them full root access, which is basically unlimited access to your phone. So be careful. Google has patched up most of these vulnerabilities. Apple has as well, but be careful when you are getting text messages. It doesn't necessarily require you to click on a link. Zero action on your part, so be careful. And then, of course, mobile adware. Yeah, we can be forced to download software we don't want when you click on the ads, so be very, very careful. By the way, March 2023, Google sounded the alarm bells about not one, not two, but 18 bugs lurking in the Android operating system. They're out there, so let's be careful. Visit me online, craigpeterson.com. Well, we've been worried about our passwords getting hacked, good passwords, right? We talked about that how many times? Well, how about the roads getting cracked? Get it? By these heavy electric vehicles. A lot of people haven't really thought about this. When you look at the road taxes, the taxes that are supposedly used to pay for road maintenance, and you probably know why I said supposedly used, those taxes are typically collected from fuel, correct? So you've got gasoline taxes that pay for the road, supposedly. You have diesel taxes. In fact, the reason diesel's so expensive has a lot to do with the taxes on diesel. Diesel trucks used to pay an over-the-road yearly fee, could amount to $9,000-$10,000, maybe even more, in order to help pay for the roads. So why would a diesel truck need to pay more in road taxes than your car or your SUV? Well, it's simple. Weight. The trucks weigh a whole lot, and almost all of the wear and tear, I think the last number I saw from the federal government was that about 98% of the road damage is caused by heavy trucks on the roads. There's only 1 or 2% that's caused by your car. So no doubt about it, by the way, we are subsidizing trucks going over the roads with our other taxes that we're paying right now, including the gas tax. That's part of the reason we don't use trains as much here as they do in some other parts of the world, because, again, trains had some real subsidies and all to getting all that land, but they can be far more efficient and they can handle the weight really, really well. Their trains, everything about them is designed to handle weight, lots of it. Now, how about your cars? How about your EVs? Did you know that electric cars, let's take a look at an electric vehicle like an SUV. The batteries in that EV weigh more than about 50 popular other gasoline cars. So the batteries in your EV SUV weigh as much as a Toyota Corolla or a Honda Civic. In fact, they weigh more. They weigh about 2,000, they weigh about a ton just for the batteries. Isn't that something? So where does that lead us? Well, that leads us now to this recent study that's suggesting that electric vehicles cause twice as much road damage as their gasoline counterparts. Isn't that something? So we need to weigh the pros and cons of the emission cuts and road ruts. We've got to keep an eye on this. Again, it's something that's really overlooked. And then on top of it all, how much gas does that EV buy, right? How much does it burn or buy? Unless you're like this picture I saw of an electric car pulling a small trailer, and the trailer was covered, but in the back of the trailer was a little gasoline generator that was plugged into the car to keep it going because he wanted to go on a longer trip. I just thought that was absolutely hilarious. But something like that, okay, maybe that's burning some gasoline as it's going down the road. But EVs don't burn gas, so they don't pay road taxes. They don't burn diesel, so they don't pay exorbitant road taxes. So who's paying for the roads? Well, anybody who has a regular gasoline or diesel vehicle. Who's damaging the roads? Well, more than twice the damage is being caused by an EV compared to a gasoline vehicle. So keep that in mind. Some states now are going to be charging EVs an additional fee when the vehicle is registered every year, when that license is renewed. And they're saying $100 per EV. Some states are more. I haven't heard any states that are less. But expect that to happen. You are going to be taxed, right? Death and taxes. I put in my newsletter, this came from my wife. I thought this is great. So when these electric cars' batteries overheat and burst into flames, is it still considered a zero emissions car? I thought that was pretty funny, so I included it in the newsletter this week. But it's a legitimate question, and that comes from the hurricane that they had down in Florida. Do you remember Hurricane Ian hit shore? I think it was up around the Panhandle. A lot of waterlogged cars up there, and of course you got to be careful if you're buying a used car, make sure it was not underwater. But this particular waterlogged car was electric. So what happens? Well, there are a ton of electric vehicles that were disabled because of the hurricane, the storm coming on to ground. So as those electric vehicle batteries corrode, fires start. when they get in accidents and the battery compartment's damaged. And by the way, the whole bottom of the electric car is a battery compartment. And what they're working on right now is moving those batteries all over the car. So the A pillar, B pillar, those, like the B pillar is that pillar that goes between the front door and the back door, just give you an idea. Those will be filled with batteries as well. Can you imagine that, right? So if you're in a head-on collision, a rear-end collision, a side collision, you're pretty much guaranteed to have that car catch fire because of the shorting in those batteries. And the electric vehicles, you might have noticed, cost a lot more to insure because they're so expensive to repair. Many times, an accident that would be fixable, very fixable, on your gasoline car causes a complete write-off when it comes to your electric car because of the potential damage to the batteries and the battery compartment in there. I just saw another 30% drop in the value of electric cars now on the used market. And the federal government, to try and encourage people to buy a used electric car, don't worry, people, if you buy one, and you might have to pay $20,000 for a new battery for your car. You just don't know it's used. But don't worry, we'll give you a $3,000 credit to buy a used electric car. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. By the way, it takes special training to be able to put out one of these fires on electric vehicles, and it takes thousands of gallons of water to put them out as well. Isn't that something? So Florida and California, the two states with the largest number of electric cars on the road out there. We got another green story for you here. Sweden, who is a country that decided they weren't going to bow a knee to the whole COVID craziness that happened, right? They did not do the lockdowns. They did not mandate the jab. They did not mandate the wearing of the masks. They did not close their schools. They did not force people indoors. And now the statistics are showing that, yes, it was a great idea because fewer people died. Right? It's just like people getting the jab. President Biden getting COVID again. His wife getting COVID again. Right? Apparently the average number of times that you got COVID if you got the jab was three times. And I had COVID. I think everybody's got it by now, right? And I only had it once, and it really wasn't too bad. So lucky me, I guess, is the bottom line. But Sweden set another milestone that maybe we should pay some attention to. Sweden has decided it wants to be green. What does that mean? Well, they figured out that, in fact, green does not mean solar panels. It does not mean windmills. It does not mean ocean power. It means nuclear power. The so-called green power that many people have, many states are using, is unstable. We need power in order to live. We need power in order to run our businesses, in order to grow our food. We need power to pump the water out of the ground and purify it. Everything needs power. So if you're building solar farms or you're building windmill farms, there will be times when neither one of those works. So where do you get your power from? Well, as it turns out, you need nuclear. So Sweden has said, forget about that. We're just going to have nuclear power. If you want to have your own little production, go right ahead, right? And this is a severe blow to the global climate agenda. And Sweden has completely scrapped their so-called green energy credits. Because remember, windmills are not green. Solar panels are not even close to being green when you consider the manufacturing, the distribution, and then ultimately the disposal of all of these things. It's not green at all. So we've got to be very, very careful. They have completely abandoned their goal of 100% so-called renewable energy. And I want to point out, while we're talking about nuclear, one of the really neat things about the new nuclear plants is there are nuclear technologies today where the plant is manufactured in a factory. No more problems with, okay, we didn't build this right, that didn't line up, you're using a contractor that has never poured the right kind of concrete for this type of reactor, etc. It's built in a factory and shipped to the location. They are inherently safe, intrinsically safe, in fact. They don't have to have anyone monitor them. They don't have to have cooling systems. They are phenomenal. And some of these new nuclear power plants use spent nuclear fuel from the old nuclear reactors that are out there. Talking about a win-win, and Sweden's leading the way, throwing away the stupidity of some of this green movement. And I got to put this in: massive Nebraska solar park completely smashed to pieces by a hailstorm. Yeah, millions of dollars down the tubes, and of course, no electricity from that panel anymore. Not just panel, but that old field. Visit me online, craigpeterson.com, and remember to subscribe right now.